Hello. Hello, YouTube. Hello, darlings. It's PK Babalon here. So, I've been doing these classic lit readings, mythology readings, because I love reading out loud and because I'm a massive nerd, particularly a nerd for mythology, folklore, and history. So I thought, as a little bonus, I thought it would be cool to kind of share some of the information, the background information, the analysis of some of these readings. I'm going to start with sharing some information about reading I did from the Poetic Edda, Part 1, Voluspo, the Wise Woman's Prophecy. Now, I find my translations, because obviously it wasn't originally written in modern English, on sacredtext.com. If you are really into mythology, mytho-history, folklore, religion, comparative religion, Sacred Text is the place for you. That's sacred-text.com. And it is just a huge free library. Pretty much everything on there is public domain. And oh, my mic's a little hot. I'm gonna turn that down. Oh, that's better. Okay. Yeah, it's just full of amazing information. So there's quite a few of these actually, of these readings that I've done. I found the translations there. The Poetic Edda, this version that's on the Sacred Text website, is by Henry Adams Bellows. It was translated and published in 1936. So I'm just going to give you, share with you some of his information, his analysis on this reading. So Poetic Edda, Volume 1, Lays of the Gods, Voluspo, the Wise Woman's Prophecy. And he has an introductory note. At the beginning of the collection in the Codex Regius stands the Voluspo, the most famous and important, as it is likewise the most debated of all the Eddic poems. Another version of it is found in a huge miscellaneous compilation of about the year 1300, the Hoxbook, and many stanzas are included in the Prose Edda of Snorri Sturluson. The order of the stanzas in the Hoxbook version differs materially from that of the Codex Regius, and in the published editions, many interpolations, the order of the stanzas in the Codex Regius seem more logical than any of the wholesale improvements which have been undertaken. The general plan of the Voluspo is fairly clear. Othin, this is a note from BK here, I have learned that in the old language, the D was pronounced like a TH, and so while you may be used to hearing someone say Odin, I will be saying Othin as it is written. And in this analysis, that is how Mr. Henry Adams Bellows refers to him as well. Othin, chief of the gods, always conscious of impending disaster and eager for knowledge, calls on a certain Volva, or wise woman. BK again, that's V-O-L-V-A, Volva, not vulva, although the body part, although the closeness in words is very interesting and makes me think of Sheila in a Gig, a character that you will find on the walls of certain ancient churches, and perhaps I will do a talk on her one day because she's amazing. But anyway, back to Othin. He calls on a certain Volva, or wise woman, presumably bidding her to rise from the grave. She first tells him of the past, of the creation of the world, the beginning of years, the origins of the dwarfs. At this point, there's clearly interpolated catalog of the dwarfs' names in stanzas 10 through 16. Of the first man and woman, of the world Ash Yggdrasil, and of the first war between the gods and the Vanir, or the anglicized form, the Wanes. Then in stanzas 27 to 29, as further proof of her wisdom, she discloses some of Othin's own secrets and the details of his search for knowledge. Rewarded by Othin for what she has thus far told, stanza 30, she then turns to the real prophecy, the disclosure of the final destruction of the gods. This battle, in which fire and flood overwhelm heaven and earth as the gods fight their enemies, is the great fact in Norse mythology, the phrase describing it, Ragnarok, the fate of the gods. It's become familiar by confusion with the word Roker, twilight, in the German Götterdämmerung. The wise woman tells of the Valkyries who bring the slain warriors to support Othin and the other gods in the battle, of the slaying of Balder, best and fairest of the gods, through the wiles of Loki, of the enemies of the gods, of the summons to battle on both sides, and of the mighty struggle, till Othin is slain, and fire leaps high about heaven itself. Stanzas 31 to 58. But this is not all. A new and beautiful world is to rise on the ruins of the old. Balder comes back, and fields unsowed bear ripened fruit. Stanzas 59 to 66. The final passage, in particular, has caused wide differences of opinion as to the date and character of the poem. That the poet was a heathen and not Christian seems almost beyond dispute. There is an intensity and a vividness in almost every stanza which no archaizing Christian could possibly have achieved. On the other hand, the evidences of Christian influence are sufficiently striking to outweigh the arguments of Finnur Johnson, Mühlenhoff, and others who maintained that the Voluspo is purely a product of heathendom. The roving Norsemen of the 10th century, very few of whom had as yet accepted Christianity, were nevertheless in close contact with the Celtic races, which had already been converted. And in many ways the Celtic influence was strongly felt. It seems likely, then, that the Voluspo was the work of a poet living chiefly in Iceland, though possibly in the Western Isles, in the middle of the 10th century, a vigorous believer in the old gods, and yet with an imagination active enough to be touched by the vague tales of different religion emanating from his neighbor Celts. How much the poem was altered during the 200 years between its composition and its first being committed to writing is largely a matter of guesswork. But allowing for such an obvious interpolation as the catalogue of dwarves, and for occasional lesser errors, it seems quite needless to assume such great changes as many editors do. The poem was certainly gross. The poem was certainly not composed to tell a story with which its early hearers were quite familiar. The lack of continuity which baffles modern readers presumably did not trouble them in the least. It is, in effect, a series of gigantic pictures, put into words with a directness and sureness which speak the poet of genius. It is only after the reader, with the help of many notes, has familiarized himself with the names and incidents involved that he can begin to understand the effect which this magnificent poem must have produced on those who not only understood, but believed it. So that is what our good friend Henry Adams Bellows has to say about the Voluspo. I personally found it to be a gorgeous piece, a really beautiful poem with really incredibly rich imagery, and so striking. It was actually my first time reading it. Sometimes I try to read ahead, other times sometimes I will just go for it and just record on a first reading. If I mess something up, obviously I pause it, fix it, what have you. As someone who is, I'm going to say moderately informed, educated on Norse mythology, as well as history and the crossovers too between like the Norse and Celt. It was really kind of exciting to be reading through it and recognizing names that I didn't expect to run into. Obviously, Othin, Loki, Balder, those names you would expect. But like the names of all the dwarves, I was just like, oh, hey, I recognize these from other stories. Those of you who are Tolkien fans probably also recognized some of those names. But I also think that even if a person is completely, brand new to these stories, that it makes a lovely introduction. It makes just a really beautiful and epic introduction to these tales. And so as I did my reading and the music that I chose to go with it, I tried to create something that was engaging and that pulled you in. So whether you knew the story or not, you could go for that ride and feel like you made some kind of connection with these mythic characters. So I hope that I was somewhat successful in that. I'll definitely be continuing through the Poetic Edda and reading more. I don't know if I'll get through the whole thing because, sagas do be sagas and epics do be epics, and they are very long. But, I plan on doing this for a while, so on a long enough timeline, I'll probably get there. If you found this interesting, if you would like to hear more like shared analyses like this, or just a little more about the background of why I choose particular readings, let me know in the comments. Let me know if you enjoyed it. You can even let me know if you thought it was dumb. That's okay too. I'll ignore you because I have rejection sensitivity dysphoria and it will make me sad. But please be honest. Tell me what you think. And yeah, I think that's it for me for this one, as I'm just winging it along, trying to be more comfortable with throwing out my raw nerdery. So have a good night or a good day, depending what time you're listening to this, and see you on my Patreon, or I'll see you in the YouTubes. And thanks for listening.